Hello and welcome to another episode of The Scramble. Thanks for joining us, and I'm your host, Jason Hawley. Today we'll discuss the armed robbery of a Subway in Arkansas by a young man who was upset at the Subway diet that allegedly didn't work out for him. We'll also talk about the use of the word God in Malaysia among Muslims and Christian students. And finally, we'll discuss the large increase in homelessness across the U.S. at large and here locally in Las Vegas. First, allow me to introduce some of our panelists. To my right, we have Ezra Mala, I believe, senior in journalism and media studies. To my left, we have David Sarabian, a senior in political science and also a former State Department intern. Congratulations, David. To my right, we have Brittany Altamirano, a graduate student in journalism and media studies. And to my left, we have James Schaefer as well, an aspiring journalism major. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Let's start off with our first topic. In Arkansas, a Subway diet failed for a young man by the name of Zachary Raphael Torrance, 18 years old. And given the anger that he felt that this diet didn't work out for him, he ended up robbing the Subway that he frequented with a gun, essentially, armed robbery. Okay. Given this idea that there is a prevalence of advertisements in the media that propagate this idea that Subway diets actually work, is this perhaps one demonstration of this idea that maybe advertisements are not that honest and that maybe there should be some additional regulation, or should we not regulate? Is this perhaps a one-off instance that occurred? James, what do you think?
Well, I think day-to-day products such as food products, car companies, and makeup products should abide by that. They should be made sure that they are abiding by the advertisements that they are advertising. By that I'm saying they need to make sure is what they're saying. If their product does whatever they're saying, we need to make sure that it is what they're saying. For example, not only Subway, but there has been instances of Activia. You've seen the Jamie Lee Curtis commercial where she eats Activia. On the packages, it says scientifically and clinically nutritional products. And when they finally found out that that was not the case, they got sued for $45 million. So I think it is good for the customers to be educated on the products that they are consuming. But not just day-to-day products, but not everyday products, I don't think need to abide by the rules of making sure that their advertisements are as they say. Things like Boeing or Koch Industries, I don't think they need to abide by the same laws of advertisement, but the day-to-day products do.
Did Subway deserve to get robbed? David, what do you think?
Would you be deserved to be robbed? No, they didn't deserve to be robbed, especially by some guy that can't keep having the cookies added to his Subway meal. Obviously, this whole notion, there's misleading advertising. Of course, there's misleading advertising. You know, is a woman really buying Maybelline eyelash stuff because she doesn't want to look like Halle Berry? No.
I like how you used that example.
Yes.
Chosen.
I look out for the women on this panel.
So what are the ways to kind of solve this issue then? If advertising is getting to the point where it's affecting people, where they're actually taking these things seriously, where they think, you know what, I am going to be like Jared. I am going to lose 250 pounds or.
Well, how many years has the Jared diet been out? Last I recall is over a decade, something like that. Mm-hmm. I remember for years. And if this is the one incidence in that many years of tens of millions of people, if not hundreds of millions, eating at Subway, then I'm not terribly concerned about that, because if somebody is particularly jaded about the Subway diet not working for them, and maybe he forgot to read the part where you need to exercise too, I don't know the particulars of the circumstances. But it's completely ridiculous that he would take such an action. And he robbed the store. It wasn't, I'm going to protest and say that I'm angry about this. No, he went straight for the money.
Brittany, Ezra, any thoughts on this as well?
I think people just choose random excuses for their actions. Like, I don't believe that, the robbery was because his diet was messed or something like that. So it's just something that you have to find to rely on as an excuse. So I don't know. It's just funny how, we all know that advertisements are always not true. Like, as you said, in makeup products or anything, it doesn't really take away the little dots on your face or
Does it
anything
take
like
away
that.
my crow's
It
feet
doesn't take
when I
anything
look in the
away.
mirror?
So it's just an excuse for him. He was like, "Oh, I messed up my diet." It's not true.
It's
That's what I
definitely an
think.
excuse. Mr. Torrance robbed 2 stores as well as the one at Subway. So to say, "Oh, you caught me," well, I robbed this one because my diet didn't fall through.
Yeah.
But I do believe companies do follow through on some of their advertisements and do listen to the customers that they have. McDonald's, for example, had a whole PR stunt where they had a thing at a bus stop where you pressed and asked them questions and they responded
Right.
to you.
Right.
So I think companies are taking a lot on to what the customers are asking. In this case, I think that when it comes to a diet is a good guideline. It shouldn't be all that you follow.
Brittany, what are your thoughts?
I would like to bring attention to the Red Bull case that the man sued and the company ended up paying about $13 million in either products or cash to their customers because it did not actually give wings. And these sort of things are things that companies are going to have to be just aware of, that, you know, when they make these claims that they're going to have to pay if they get somebody. But I don't think the responsibility lays on the companies, because these marketing ploys and a way to stand out in a marketing society, we have to make certain claims that are ridiculous in order to grab the customer's attention, in order to have that sort of competitive nature in the field. So to have somebody, you know, do this is not expected, no, but we need to call the public to be a little bit more responsible for their actions.
Is this indicative of perhaps a trend that we may see more of in the future? We had the incident with Red Bull, where I think there was a young man tried to jump off of a roof because he thought he had wings. We just had Mr. Torrance rob a Subway in Arkansas. Might there be additional circumstances related to advertising? And if there are, is regulation the answer? What is the answer? Is there an answer? Like, is this not an issue?
Regulation is not the answer. It is upon the customers that buy the products. If the company is not following through on their promises, then I hope that there is enough of an educated customer base to say that you are wrong. Like Taco Bell. Taco Bell says they have all-season beef. They found out that they've been putting all their beef through and on a corn miller. When the lawsuit was finally filed, Taco Bell's response was to put advertisements in magazines mocking the lawsuit until they just forgot about it. It doesn't make any sense. What we need to think of is not regulations from state or government or anything like that. We need to educate the customers. We need to make sure that there's an educated consumer basis for the products.
Don't you think that's a little idealistic, though, James? To educate the customer?
Well,
do you
then,
really think everybody's going to be educated?
Not everyone, but enough to make a difference. Like this McDonald's PR stunt. There had to have been enough people saying, we don't like pink goo for our beef. And when it is brought up and the media catches on to it, there is a response. And I believe we need to look for more responses from the companies that we have day to day.
Any final words on this topic before we move on?
I think the answer is not necessarily with the company or entirely on the public, even though we could hope for the best with that. But I think where it rests is the law and being able to protect companies who are using puffery to use their marketing ploys in such a way. So.
Interesting. Well, it does make for some interesting discussion later on as well. And if we do see any additional developments, we'll make sure to bring back this story and talk about how we can rectify this. Moving on to our next topic. In recent years, the use of the word God in Malaysia, or Allah, has been restricted to those practicing Muslim, or Muslim children in particular, in Malaysia. As a matter of fact, if you look at Bibles actually, Malaysian language Bibles are also banned in the country. So when we look at this idea of Christianity and the use of the word Allah, the use of the word God, what are the implications for Malaysia, for the children there, when you restrict those who can say it and those who can't? And what might be the implications for those around the world? Ezra, if I could start with you, actually.
Sure.
You have an international background, and so I think you may have a better perspective on this than those of us here as well.
Okay, let's just start off by saying what the word Allah means, or where does it come from. It's an Arabic word, and it's one of many names that we know of God. So it's one name of God. We have 99 other names that we know of, as far as Muslim background that I have. And so let's say Christians or Catholic or any other religion in Egypt or the Arab word, they don't use that word when they refer to God. They use another word that's called Rabb, right? So, which means literal translation, or the closest translation to this in English, is Lord. So, with that being said, the word Allah is only used in the Middle East and Arabic countries by Muslims, and it's used by non-Muslims when it's a culture phrase. Only, just something that they hear every day, and it's just something, like, I don't know, it's just a phrase. They don't really believe that Allah is God. You know what I mean? So that's exactly, like, at first when I read the article, I was like, this is ridiculous. Why wouldn't they let them, use the word? It's for everyone. God is God. But then I looked at it and I brushed up on my Arabic and my religion, and I was like, you know what? That makes more sense, because it's a name of God. Think about it when you, like in Hinduism or something, they have many names, or not many names. There's actually one God, and his name is and it's spelled Ohm. This is God for them. So when you take that word and you say, okay, or use it in another country and say, refer it to Jesus, or you call Jesus that name, wouldn't it be offensive or something? It's just taking another name from a language to use for your own God, I guess. I hope I don't offend anyone, but that's what I see it as. It's just a name that you don't really translate. I don't think Allah translates to God. It is Allah. Like, your name is Jason in all the languages.
So the restriction, though, if I could ask you, the restriction for only Muslim children to be able to use Allah, to say Allah, in Malaysia, what are your thoughts on that? So as far as like contextualizing Allah and looking at the variety of different names for God, I think we could all definitely agree on that this idea that they should be open is definitely substantiated. But what do you think about this restriction?
I think it's a little bit too extreme. I agree with you. I think they should be able to use it. As I said, if it's a culture thing, if it's something that you grow up hearing and listening to from your family or neighbors, because we do know that Malaysia is the biggest or the largest Muslim country in the world. They have the most Muslim population. But when it comes to in text, like the Bible, I don't think that's exactly the right place for it, because in Old Testaments or like other Testaments, you don't see the word Allah in there, if that makes sense. So they should be using it, just as a life word or whatever, lively word, but it shouldn't be in text.
Brittany, did you have a thought that you were?
I did. I think in this country we have separation of church and state, or at least we try to. But in other countries there may not be that separation, and so depending on who's in power, and from my understanding, the people in power now have been in power for 50-some years, and so this has kind of been a long-standing. And they have, what was it, the New York Times? They had people quoting liberal Muslims saying that it was the conservative Muslims impressing this on the population. And so I think what we're arguing here is more on the government side of making a law impressing that on religion and vice versa, rather than separating the two. And so I think that's when it becomes a little bit sticky, because we come from somewhere that, we are talking about taking out, God from the Pledge of Allegiance and from, things like that, and taking off "In God We Trust" when our country was founded on, Christianity or some form of it. And so I think it's just a little bit different in another country, and that may be something to consider as well.
Okay. David, James, David, how about I start with you? Former State Department intern, tell me, this idea that the separation of church and state should remain in the United States, it's actually been pushed by progressives. Now, do you think that we are just approaching an issue like this from a different standpoint that's so divergent from the Malaysian culture that we are seeing an issue where there may not be an issue? What do you think?
Well, what you're talking about with international relations is whether or not the United States ought to or should impress its values upon other countries. Now, I am not aware of a foreign policy position the United States has taken on this particular issue, but as we know with Malaysia, they do have their own court system that specifically regarding Muslim law, that has limitations on the punishments that it can do, from anywhere from a certain number of strokes of caning to a certain number of fines to a certain number of years in prison. Now, the way the Malaysians view it is that you are not a full Malay, M-A-L-A-Y. If you were born there, you have to be, in order to qualify as a Malay, you have to be born there. There are a few other factors, and one of them is that you have to be Muslim. And very much, culture is very much tied to language, and especially with Islam, and especially with Arabic. You really cannot truly learn Islam unless you read the Quran in Arabic. And if you go to any religious school, that is how they teach you. That being said, this strikes me as more of a policy to create a separation between the idea of somebody that is a Malay, a true Malaysian, and somebody that is of an ethnic minority. And the specific reason why is that the Malay versions of the Christian Bible are not permitted, but Indonesian versions of the Bible are permitted. I don't know specifically which language in Indonesia, considering there are over a dozen official languages for the Indonesians. That being said, this just seems to be a codification of trying to create a separation between the traditional idea of what a Malaysian should be and others. Now, could you go so far as to say that this is almost like Nazism and attempting to create a different minority group from what is viewed as the pure Malayans and what they should be? I wouldn't go so far, because they're not saying it's a eugenics movement, but it's definitely a move, and it is a shift towards creating a separation between the idea of what a Malaysian is and the other minority groups.
Well, so you could argue that maybe this is like a contemporary version of segregation. Not that segregation in the U.S. wasn't contemporary, I mean it was, but this is another form of it in some way.
I wouldn't go so far as to say in that way, because there aren't exactly different ethnically designated bathrooms like with the Jim Crow laws, but it is certainly a push. Like Boutros Dali's article that he did in Foreign Policy, the magazine years ago, about globalization and fractionalization, where the more globalized, and he's the former UN Secretary General, the more globalized that we get, the more fractionalized it is. And as we start to communicate more, the more there is for this counter-mobilization to create these own little colonies of people, these own little self-identifiers. And I really think that this is just a response to that.
James, any final thoughts on this topic?
To put it bold-faced, the Malaysian government is not following the laws of their own constitution. Just like you said, the United Malaysian National Organization, which has been ruling for 57 years, they're not following their own rules.
But they make the rules, James.
Yes, but their own rules.
That's the part of being the government in power, is that you can make the rules.
It is a part of it that says that no law can prohibit anyone from reasonable practice of their faith. And just like you said, the proper noun, the God versus the proper name, that is only one step to reaching what you're saying and what you're feeling.
Yeah, but Christians don't refer to their God as Allah.
Right,
Yeah.
because Christians...
So why should it? So if I'm going to play the devil's advocate here,
Okay.
why should it matter to the Christians?
What is your proper name for God?
My proper name for God is God.
Okay. but
Or
you
if
have
we
to
wanted to be
understand.
really accurate, we could call him Yahweh.
Okay, there you go. So the difference is
Yeah.
that just like you said, Allah is like Yahweh. I can't pronounce. I'm sorry.
Yahweh.
Yahweh. And the difference is when you say God and we say Allah, Allah is the same noun, God and Allah. Well, Allah in Malaysian is the proper noun. So that's the difference. It's not the difference between what I say compared to what you say. It's what I understand that saying is as what you understand that saying is. And that is the difference between what the Malaysian government is not understanding with their people and the religions that they practice.
I think they perfectly understand. I perfectly think that they want to push Christians aside as a minority group.
Okay, then I think that's wrong.
Well,
There
okay,
we go.
good.
There we go.
You think that's wrong. They obviously don't.
Yeah. So where does that leave us?
Well, that leaves us at an interesting juncture, but we'll leave it at that. And it does make for an interesting topic we can discuss next time. But please stay with us. We will take a short break, and we will be back in just a few moments.
remember the moment.
I'll never forget that moment.
That changed my life.
At that moment, it hit me. This is why I joined the Guard. We're soldiers, always ready to protect our country. But we've also got communities. Family, friends, neighbors who count on us. I couldn't believe it. I just saved a life. Somebody from my hometown.
See what it means to be a citizen soldier at NationalGuard.com.
Thank you for staying with us, and welcome back to the Scramble. Our last topic, we're looking at homelessness, not only across the United States, but specifically in Las Vegas, where we have seen the largest increase in the U.S., not only across the U.S. between 2013 and 2014 in homelessness, but in Las Vegas. Las Vegas has topped the charts, essentially, if you will. So we're going to talk about the issues with homelessness in Las Vegas and how to rectify some of these issues. What may be causing homelessness in Las Vegas and the U.S. at large? Brittany, if I could move to you first. This idea of, I guess not an idea, but an epidemic, you could say, of homelessness. Is this just an issue, a byproduct of the increasing wage gap that has been well documented in recent years, or are there other factors involved here?
You know, I would say it is the wage gap. However, I do know that I have had some conversations. I talk to people. So I've had a few conversations with certain homeless individuals that have gotten this way because of the lifestyle that Vegas promotes and the just carelessness with money. And a lot of times, actually, my husband works at Palace Station, and a lot of the local people will bring in full paychecks to cash and gamble that very night.
That's because they get points for it.
True, but they're losing their earnings for a job, so that obviously puts them in a strange place. And so I don't necessarily think it's entirely you can sort of blanket statement over all homeless, but I do think it is various factors, and it can be due to family, it can be due to drug use, it can be due to veteran status and mental illness. There's so many factors that we have to consider, and especially in Vegas, we've got a lot of the different factors happening in our population.
Okay,
so.
fair enough. Ezra, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, as she said, or she mentioned, family plays one of the roles that or factors that goes into that. I personally had a friend who was homeless for 4 years at least until he joined the military, just because it would support him and give him a house or at least money. And it was due to a family conflict. Both parents weren't really getting along anymore, so got a divorce. He left. The boy was on his own at age 13. So. And it was really tough. Like it's not just wages, or it's just so many things together that really hurt our youth, I guess.
James, any thoughts on this?
Oh yeah, the issue that I think that we're seeing is that this is a byproduct of the recession. Honestly, I think we're doing a lot better than what was expected. The biggest fallback comes from yes, gambling, and yes, other effects, but I think what the biggest one was construction in Las Vegas. I mean, we have a giant 68-story big blue building next to the Stratosphere that stopped construction during the recession. Las Vegas and Fort Lauderdale were the hardest hit. I think we're doing much better than we were thinking we were going to do. I mean, back in 2013, the homeless census in Southern Nevada said that we had dropped by 22% homeless rates in Nevada between 2011 and 2013. And this fallback does come from things that could be prevented. I mean, the usual suspect options we have, funding for homeless organizations, prioritizing homeless services, and maybe increasing minimum wage. The usual suspects for options that we have. But I don't think we are at that drastic of a state. It is a fallback from what happened in Las Vegas from the recession. And honestly, I think we're doing a lot better than we thought we were going to do.
David, is the increased homelessness, as what James stated, these so-called usual suspects with regard to minimum wage and decreased construction contract jobs?
No, it is.
Tell me.
It doesn't have to do with this. The rise was in individual homelessness,
right,
not specifically family homelessness. And last I checked, the recessions happened in 2008, and it's 2014, over half a decade ago.
Right.
So this seems like an issue of post hoc ergo propter hoc, after the fact because of it, which is a complete fallacy.
It is. Tell us about
this seems to be a fallacy. I think they probably just changed how they measure the statistic to make the numbers look bigger in order to get some social action, which is kind of a dirty trick, but if that's what's necessary in order to get more funding for homeless programs, then that's what they decided to do. Now, I think it's more of a classification issue than necessarily that particular number, but if it is a true classification issue, then if these are really the amounts of people that are homeless out there, then it's good that we're getting those numbers. It's good that we're finally addressing the number of homeless people, that if this is the critical mass of number of people that needs for action to take place, then so be it.
So what action should take place? Like, does it have to do primarily with this increasing divergence between those who have and those who have not?
No. It's a gap between those who have and those who have not the billionaires getting richer and then the poor people staying the same. It's like these are people that are homeless. They're at the very bottom. They obviously would have fewer problems depending on their mental state if they had more income. And this is more of an issue of a lot of people become homeless because they lost their job or because they got laid off. And so I think this is more of an issue of it's a few issues, but one, you need to take care of them. They need to be fed, they need to be clothed, especially the wintertime is coming. It gets cold, it gets down to the 30s in Las Vegas. They need clothes for things like that. Shelter, then whatever job skill training they might have or transportation to jobs that they are qualified for.
Give us your final point now, before we have to go. What is your final point?
This issue has many factors involved, but at the very least, we need to focus on getting these people out of homeless, out of poverty, and being productive citizens.
Great. And on that note, that is all the time we have for today. But please share any of your ideas or topics you'd like us to scramble about to thescramble.unlv@gmail.com. You can also catch full episodes of The Scramble at unlv.tv. For all of us here at The Scramble, thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.